is Jessica Crow. I am the founder of Apogee and the host of Change Leader Insights, which is a podcast that is all about change, leadership, self-leadership, team leadership, leading organizations through change, through your active conscious leadership. And I am so excited. I have Aileda here with me. She is an expert in this space. I'm going to read her bio really quickly, and I know you're going to get as excited as I am to listen to this conversation. So as a seasoned entrepreneur with over a decade of experience, Aileda is a transformative business alchemist and conscious leadership advisor, blending cutting-edge business strategies with deep intuitive insights, that's my favorite part, to guide leaders and organizations through transformative growth. I got connected to Aileda through another individual who was a podcast guest, and he was fantastic, all about mindfulness, and connected us. And I'm so glad to have you here today to share your wisdom with the Change Leader Insights community. Can you give us a little bit more detail on your bio, just to help listeners and viewers understand kind of how you got to where you're at, what got you really excited about studying and getting into this area? And then we'll dive right into the topic of conscious leadership, which is really important for people who are leading themselves and others through change. So take it away, Aileda.
Thank you, Jessica, and thanks for having me. I appreciate you. So for me, transformation, change, like it for anyone, right? It happens throughout an entire lifetime. And so there are those pivotal moments that you'll come into in life that are just those defining things that are going to build your character, right? It's those moments that will make you or break you. And when you break through and you smash the glass ceiling and you keep moving, then, it changes you forever, right?
Yeah.
And so I look at growth also the same way. So I have a corporate background. My whole beginnings and in my career started in the corporate world. And I just continued to excel and expand and lead, right? And I'm a natural born leader, right? So that's one of the things about me that, is a blessing, I would say, and a gift, right? And I say that leadership can be taught, right? And conscious leadership can be taught, which is amazing and incredible. But it's a process if somebody's not giving you the roadmap, right?
Right.
And so it's been a career and a lifetime full of that. I mean, I have managed to do international business. I went to the White House and give my business opinions on international trade agreements, which was super cool, and been consulting for 13 years. And most recently, one of my big projects was a group of medical practitioners in the city of New York, and it was just before the pandemic. And so various practices throughout the medical industry, right? And now all of a sudden you're in crisis situation and crisis mode. And I'm an operational expert, right? When it comes to, I say expert now, which I never used to, right?
Right.
Now I really feel like I can own that and fully embody that because I know what I did during that
Yeah.
time. And I know
Yeah.
what I orchestrated and I know the impact that it had, right? And I was able to see it across all spectrums of life, like from the saving, from the service, right? Acts of service and being in that present moment awareness. And so that was the other thing is that conscious leadership, it made such an impact on me. I was like, whoa, it almost felt like all these years, right, that I have been cultivating myself to be in the present moment and have that conscious awareness, literally just all intersection just came right to that pivotal moment of, okay, this is why, right?
Yeah.
That's what it felt like because
Yeah.
I had to guide, I had to lead, I had to keep calm, I had to orchestrate, I had to design, I had to build, right? And I had to support, right? Most importantly, the support piece, right? And
Yeah.
picking up the pieces and scooping them up and then really crafting and creating around all of that to support the masses, right? As well as these practitioners who went running straight into the ERs and started slaying it, now
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's like, who's gonna pick up all these businesses and all these pieces, right? And make
Right.
something out of it. And so that is just that's locked me in. After coming out of that, I did conscious leadership development training programs and I put
Yep.
those together and sky's the limit with those from that point forward.
Yeah, yeah. So what, yeah, and I love hearing these sort of story arcs as I sort of whenever I interview people, I hear about kind of what got them to where they are. And for you, it sounds like you kind of took everything that you experienced and built it into this, what you now have as a training program, essentially to teach people how to take those pieces of insights, those aha moments, those breaking of the glass ceiling experiences, and use that information to help them level up as leaders and to unlock that conscious awareness component for themselves, which is really great. I mean, that's the whole reason why anybody goes through professional development or training, is to learn from others who are further down the path. And so that's a benefit to individuals who want to go through that process as well. How would you define conscious leadership? Like what's a way, like a simple way for people who are sort of new to hearing about conscious leadership? What's your definition of it?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question, because I feel like there's a lot of confusion out in the marketplace uh,
Mm-hmm.
around the word conscious. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it gets confused with conscientious.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, I can't even say it, right?
Yeah.
That, right? Um, it gets confused, and it gets confused primarily with sustainability, green building, and design.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that it's not a part of consciousness, but I always reference consciousness in regards to neuroscience, right? And
Mm-hmm.
our capability to truly stay in what an athlete would refer to as the zone.
Mm-hmm.
There's many ways to say it. There's been research that's been done in the medical community for over 40 years. UMass Chan Medical Center has been studying awareness, self-awareness, and the
Mm-hmm.
effects that it has on the human body. So it's about the fact that, conscious awareness, I equate it to same thing as like our spirit, what a lot of people might
Mm-hmm.
reference as our spirit. And I say
Mm-hmm.
that because conscious awareness is when we are in that place and state of being to make new choices and new
Yeah.
decisions. Like that's evolution. Like we have to be in that in order to evolve anything, right? And so this training and development program is about creating a new operational model,
Yeah.
essentially, for an individual and also a corporation, right? And it can happen
Yeah.
across industry. But leaders need to have the capability to hold their calm, make fast, rapid decisions under fire, and potentially in chaotic situations. And we
Mm-hmm.
always hope that that's not the case, but we shouldn't, like, we should be thinking about these things in advance and training leaders to be in this present state of being, because they're less reactive, they have higher emotional intelligence, right?
Right.
A whole shebango. Like, there's no reason, like, why wouldn't you?
Right, right. There's a quote from an article that you recently wrote on LinkedIn about conscious leadership, and it says embracing change, encouraging creativity, and promoting diversity are hallmarks of a conscious leadership approach, vital for maintaining competitive edges. And I really liked that because it sort of builds on what you're saying. Why wouldn't we want to have leaders who understand conscious awareness, what that means, developing their emotional intelligence, being that calm, during the storm, which is what people need when they're going through big changes, when there's crisis, and then just the day to day, right? I mean, that's part of like, why do we want to follow leaders? We follow them because we either resonate with something they're saying, we align with them, we admire them, or maybe they're standing in their truth through that conscious awareness piece, or maybe it's all of the above. I don't know, but I think there's, yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, no question. And the creativity part, right, is what you touched on too in
Mm-hmm.
this little article snippet. And that is also vitally important, that expansive imagination creativity piece,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where solutions come from, right? And again, that ability to do something different. Like if we continue to run into almost like a traffic jam, it's like, oh, maybe we could GPS and find a different route that's easy,
Yeah.
even, right? Oftentimes
Yeah.
we just, like, aren't open to it. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I've been doing my entire profession. I actually went to school for art and
Mm-hmm.
never executed on going that path professionally. Instead, I entered the business world and corporate America And all of that creativity got applied to exactly what we're talking about today. Like
Mm-hmm.
conscious awareness and developing new operational ways, right, to lead things. And there's a big difference between managing and leading,
Yeah,
Jessica. And like
absolutely.
I know, yeah, that you probably touch on that often, right, in your programs
Definitely.
and in your teachings, I'm sure. But, I think people get that confused too. What is a manager versus a leader? A leader is a whole different ballgame. It's an orchestrator, it's not a doer.
Yeah, absolutely. Why is it, maybe this is when I think about being consciously aware and maintaining that emotional intelligence and having that leadership stance, it's not always easy to be in that place. It takes a lot of effort sometimes, unless you've got a lot of muscle memory, so to speak. Why is it hard? Or maybe it's not hard, and I'm just putting this out there, but is it hard, or why is it hard for people to be conscious leaders? Or maybe I'm just assuming that it's challenging, but I don't know. Help me out here. I don't know. Because I guess where I'm coming from, I've been around leaders, and I've been a leader myself where I wasn't always consciously aware, and I was coming from a place of reaction versus response. And then my self-reflection afterwards was like, I could have done that differently. So why is that? Why is it hard? Or is it not? And I'm just thinking about this the wrong way.
So I would say it's a challenge. And I always pivot people to start ingraining that word into their neural pathway, right?
Uh-huh.
If you have a word like hard, then that's a thought that's perpetually ingrained in your brain mechanics, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so neuroplasticity is a thing. It's very viable, it's very real.
Mm-hmm.
Reprogramming, creating new neural pathways, new connections within the brain. And so I
Mm-hmm.
always encourage people when you find a word like that that is let's call it disempowering,
Yeah, that's
right?
a good
It's a
point. Yeah.
disempowering word that is running perpetually in your vocabulary, then why not just pluck that word out and replace it with a different word? And I use the word challenge because it's like rise to the occasion.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
use I don't ever use the word stress, haven't for years and years and years and years, right? It's a dumping ground for chemicals that get released into the body
Mm-hmm.
that do not necessarily great things to the physical, right? State of being.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are going to stress and use that word, or if you're going to be challenged and use that word, the chemical reaction within the physical system are two totally different things. And you feel,
Interesting.
right?
Yeah.
You can feel the difference behind those words. And so that's one thing that I'll always encourage, but you're right, it is extremely challenging, but it's for that reason. There has to be a certain desire from within that's going to keep you between the rails, if you will, with any new training or development that
Mm-hmm.
it's,
Mm-hmm.
as I tell people, like anticipate training your brain like you would anticipate your training for physical activity.
Mm-hmm. That's a good
Muscle
point.
memory, right, is a thing. And when you train your body to do repeat motions and repeat activities, then eventually it can do it on a subconscious level,
Mm-hmm.
automatically do those moves without even thinking about them.
Mm-hmm.
When you're first learning a move, you have to really focus and be in the present moment and concentrate on it. That's the state of being that we want to increase. Or when you're learning to drive a car for the first time, you're in the present moment because you are paying attention to everything that's happening. You don't, right? You're like, it's a serious business. It's a big piece of equipment. Like,
Right.
and your heart's like palpitating. You're 16. I don't want heart palpitations, right? But I do want them to understand what that state of awareness feels like so that they can continue to come back to it more and more time and time again. Pull yourself back into it.
Got it. So if I'm okay, and that makes a lot of sense. If I am in a role where I'm going to be responsible for helping lead and guide a team through a big change, and what are some tips on how I could prepare myself so I can prepare the team? Like if you were to coach or consult with me, what would be some advice that you could give to me that I could implement today that would help me do just that?
Yeah, so change management is one of my favorite things, right? Because I was, again, having to do that on the fly, but I've also done it very structured and very methodical
Yeah. Yeah.
out as well throughout my career. So one of the things, number one things I would say is, as a leader, don't get stuck in that headspace of, because you are the professional, because you are the top person, because you, right, are the ace in
Hmm.
that situation. Do not take it upon yourself to know all the ins and outs of what's about
Hmm.
ready to take place out in the field, right? Or in your
Hmm.
operations. You need to get out there. You need to have those conversations, or send somebody to have those conversations that you trust and you value, right?
Hmm.
Depending on the level of the organization. There needs to be scouting work in every level, every person in that organization that this change is going to touch and affect.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
need to be, we need to communicate. We need to have a conversation, not communicate as in tell them what's about to happen.
Right.
As in, hey, where can you see the glitches? Where can you see this causing hiccups or delays or lack or inefficiency or
Yeah.
having a challenge for you, right? Making
Yep.
it not easier, but making it more challenging. Have those conversations, because then you can design a plan that will be
Yeah.
virtually bulletproof, and it's worth doing the homework in advance. It's
Yeah.
communication. Talk to your people.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think what's funny about that, funny, not funny, I find that a lot of the clients I work with, they skip that part quite often, understanding, we'll call it the current state, because they get so excited about where we're going, the vision, how we're, all of that. And they really miss that initial connection piece with the people that are going to be impacted by that great change that's coming down the pike. So I really resonate with what you're saying. It is important to gather that information, not only to create a bulletproof strategy, but it also, would you say it creates, people want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves, maybe, and that could help with them feeling connected to that for that reason. Like, I mean, what are your thoughts on some of the other benefits for doing that?
No question. It builds the
Yeah.
culture, right? And it also
Yeah.
builds the resilience of the team. People will always, always embrace and embody more readily that which they help to create. And people value so much when you ask for their opinion,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
that they're doing for you day in and day out, right? Just to be valued, right, and have a voice within an organization is massive. Resilience, right? So conscious
Hmm.
awareness, that's another thing that it will allow for, right? Is that space for resilience and bringing your people back, and the fortitude that they feel, right? And
Yeah.
that that when you're conscious and you're consciously aware as a leader, then you, like, that's a certain thing that you carry within you. And when you walk into a room, people feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
They know they can share with you. They know that you're an open person and that you're, like, ready to lead them, right? And the
Mhm.
best direction that you can possibly conjure together as a team unit.
How do you personally develop conscious awareness? What's your practice for staying in that space?
Yeah, meditation, right?
Mhm.
And I'm very, like, into holding my own balance, and I'm super
Mhm.
dedicated to that, right? And
Mhm.
I hold that, like, conscious awareness first, right? Being of importance, and then the understanding around my mind and how that functions. And so I
Mhm.
program myself appropriately too. They call it programming for a reason.
Mhm.
So I make sure that I'm not, taking in a ton of negative information.
Mhm.
I'm like, where do I want to go? That's where my focus is, and that's where I hold it. Again, that takes conscious awareness. If there's
Mhm.
a bunch of just bad broadcasting, when I say bad broadcasting, let me define that. I mean
Yeah.
negative information that
Yeah.
we're bombarded with. They're not, I say they, right? In very broad terms, people who are broadcasting or reporting, but they're not necessarily holding an equal balance with that. I'm
Yeah.
not one of those people who's like, don't show me anything negative in the world, right? Because you'll always hear the people say, well, Alita, but I'm a realist, right? I'm a realist. And to those people, I'm like, so am I. And because I am, I know that there's all of these lives being saved every single day that's not being
Mhm.
broadcasted on our news stations, right? We're
Yeah.
not. shown or fed all of the superheroes in the world. And there's
Yeah.
so many, right? When we just stop and think about that for a second, like that is reality.
Yeah. And that shifts from a place of negative energy to more positive, productive, just feels better thinking about it in that way too. But that, to your point, that's not what we're getting on the news day in, day out, relentlessly. That's a good point.
Yeah, so be responsible for your own programming. What are you feeding your brain, right? What are you feeding your mind? Essentially, what if your brain was like a computer system, which you've heard the analogy used
Mm-hmm.
before? Well, what if you could just use that theory analogy to plug in and be like, oh, okay, then it's my responsibility to feed it with the proper information and the
Mm-hmm.
nutrients, things that I want it to have, right? And
Mm-hmm.
technically, that system, that organ controls our entire physical, everything we do physically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whole
That makes
physical system.
sense.
So, like, why wouldn't we, again, like, why wouldn't we start paying attention to that, you know?
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I agree with that quite a bit. How do you navigate? So, feeding your brain through the consumption or the not consuming certain types of information makes sense. How do you navigate though when you're, part of, for me, when, whether it's leading a team or going through a change, you're going to get some actors who are not as aware, who lack that conscious awareness, and they bring that energy to the experience, to the conversation. What buffers can you put in place? And I know emotional intelligence plays into this and being able to react or respond, you know, and it informs how you respond. But what are some tips there for people who work in environments where their peer group is not consciously aware and they're the opposite of that?
Yeah. So, I would say that's where it's good to start having some conversations about this type of training and development too, right? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
the leadership style that is being adopted moving forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this has to happen within organizations. It's also a part of your ability to be able to be compassionate. So I'll give
Mm-hmm.
you an example. You're driving down the road, right? And somebody swerves out in front of you. Natural reaction, typically for the majority of the populace, is to be reactive to that. But if
Mm-hmm.
that were to happen to you in Japan, say, you would never see any reaction whatsoever. There would be no disrespect. There's
Mm-hmm.
offering of compassion instead.
Mm-hmm.
What? I don't know what's happening with that person in the car in front of me. Instead of
Mm-hmm.
cussing them out, and if we use, say, the golden rule or karma or any of that, right, as a
Mm-hmm.
potential theory in life, whether you believe in it or not, it's like, okay, well, I'm reacting in a certain way towards that maneuver that just happened. Yeah, I don't know what's happening within that person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
they're going through a divorce. I don't know if they're trying to get their wife to the hospital and it's an emergency. I don't know. So why am I going to send them like bad juju essentially, or like
Yeah.
negative thoughts and cuss them out? Like they don't need that. So just when you get consciously aware, you're able to almost step outside of yourself and your
Mm-hmm.
reactions. You're able to understand that when you hear people say certain things, it's more about what's happening within them
Mm-hmm.
than it is about you. And it's about taking yourself out of that personal, right,
Mm-hmm.
position. When you're able to understand that what comes out of people's mind is their own thoughts and everything kind of really starts with what's happening within them, right? Then you don't take things so personal. What you can
Mm-hmm.
do is stay super calm and be a good listener and be super compassionate, and your reaction and your response becomes entirely different. And
That makes a lot of
really
sense.
just embody that leadership position that much more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I love that. And I think that is,
You.
if all of our leaders, if all people in organizations, and it's a captive audience, right? Like if we can embed that thinking, that could really transform cultures from being potentially toxic to something more innovative and adaptive and resilient and all the words that you
Yes,
like. It's
resilient, fortitude.
yeah.
Like your culture is going to thrive. Your people are going to stay. They're going to be lifers. And like nobody wants to leave an environment where they have a quality state of being, right? They're heard,
Mhm.
their voice is heard, they're appreciated. There's compassion when there's a bad situation because your leader and even your manager then, because if you have leadership right? And that's why it has
Yeah.
to start at the top, because everything rolls down. And we all
Yeah.
know that. And so leadership has to make this commitment first, but it's a game changer across every industry and all organizations. There's no
Yeah.
question about that. And those leaders will be able to far surpass and far outperform anybody else in the industry, in their
Mhm.
industry. I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
regions, and I flipped regions before, right? Like as a
Yeah.
consultant, you're called in to fix problems, you're called to flip things, you're called to create rapid change. And that's what you then have to go in and figure out, well, where's their roadblock and why can nobody on their team, or has nobody on their team been able to figure this out? And when I sit in a room, conference room, right, full of executives, and I let them share with me, and then I look at their resources and their materials, I'm able to define very quickly because I'm outside of it. I don't have
Yeah.
an emotional attachment to it.
That's a
But that's
big,
what,
yeah.
yeah, that's what conscious leadership is, that like outside of it, no emotional attachment to it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there do you have examples of companies that are doing this well, or are we sort of at the forefront and the opportunity is for organizations to lean into this and do it well?
There's no question that there's organizations out there doing it really well, right? And so one of the books that I would actually like reference right now and actually recommend for anybody listening, if they haven't already consumed it, is From Good to Great, Jim
Yeah.
Collins,
Yeah.
right? I love that that whole entire thing is based off of research, right? And then
Yeah.
you go into the next one, which is Great by Choice. And
I
so
haven't
there's
read that one yet. Yeah.
so good, right?
Okay, good. I'm gonna have to download it on Audible. Keep going though. Sorry.
Ways, right? And so the organizations that are listed and defined, right? Like there's organizations out there already doing this. It's just that there's not enough of them. It's just like in
Yeah.
baby fetal stages. And we
Yeah.
have so far to go, right? But it happens with one person at a time. Usually, right? Even if you have one executive that works with you and learns the art of this, then they're
Hmm.
able to, right? Consciously wait for the proper opportunity to then speak to an HR representative within their organization, or the CEO or leadership, right? Director of operations, that are going to be able to hear how important this development is. And when you have
Hmm.
an all-star on your team, like if you're not stopping and listening to what they're sharing about, hey, I think the whole team could benefit from this. I'm a superstar for a reason, and it's this, right?
Hmm.
That's how it gets started. And sometimes it's just with one person, and
Yeah.
then it grows within an organization.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It makes sense. And I hope people who are listening and watching that resonates with them, because to your point, it does take just one person to get this process started, and it can bloom into something really powerful. So I really like that. Tell me a little bit about how you use your intuition. It's part of your brand. Where does that fit into all of this, that intuition piece? Because I think that's something that a lot of leaders would like to learn how to leverage more in a very,
Like
data
realistic,
driven
not
hard. Yeah. Yeah.
non-realistic way, right?
Yeah.
So really, the best way to describe that would be, I would say it's like an embodiment of an understanding of how things actually, again, when you understand your operational system and
Hmm.
how we're designed to function properly, then it makes that process so much easier. And really, when you think about it, I'm just going to take you into these moments.
Hmm.
I'm going to give you a story and then I'm going to ask you to share one. So
Hmm.
intuition, I will tell you, one of the first times intuition hit me, I was young, I was a new driver, I was driving super fast, I was coming over the railroad tracks. I had this feeling before I came over this hill, like I need to slow down, there's going to be an officer on the other side. Like that gut intuitive feeling. But I
Yeah.
didn't pay attention to it and I overrode it, and then boom, I got pulled over.
Yeah.
That
Good
like that was
example.
like beginning stages of like the learning lesson of the importance
Yeah.
of, right, paying attention to this inside one's own internal body and system. So like, is there one that you can share that would be something that
Yeah. Well, as you were describing that, I was thinking of a car, potential. I was driving and a car swerved out and it was like slow motion, but I had sort of known going into it. So that came to mind. But for me in particular with intuition, I the moments, I don't remember what the or what the, like what it was, but I remember in those moments, it was the quiet voice, the one
Yeah.
that said like, be still or listen or don't respond. That one, when I paid attention to it, again, I don't remember what I was trying to do, but I remember having that feeling of, it was somewhere down there. It wasn't the loud voice. It wasn't, you mentioned spirit earlier. Ego is the first one to talk. It's loud. And then spirit comes in if you just sit in stillness with it. And that's when I feel intuition. That's when I'm like, okay, this is something that I need to pay attention to. But I have to be totally honest. It's something that I wasn't paying attention to for a long time, because I didn't trust it. And some of the other things, in my early on in my career, um, it was all about just working really hard and performing, and the things I ignored a lot of stuff that I didn't necessarily like or align with, but I was
Mhm.
doing it for, I wanted a job and I wanted to make money and I wanted to do all these things. But now that I'm older and I feel more secure and stable and confident, I wish I'd listened to my intuition earlier on in life. I think I've developed a better relationship with my intuition now, but it's taken some time, interestingly.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, I mean, welcome, right?
right.
And oftentimes it happens through experiences more than
Yeah.
not that we come into this like, oh, I need to pay attention to, right? That internal like gut instinct is what people refer to it as, because sometimes they get it as a feeling. You get it as like kind of like a quiet voice, like whispering.
Hmm.
Sometimes people just get it as a feeling, like a
Hmm.
yeah, like don't go down that alley, right? Or
Yeah.
turn left versus turn right, or whatever the case may be. And it's learning to trust and be
Yes.
guided by that and be okay with that, right? Um, More than not. And the more conscious you become, the more balanced and aware you are,
Hmm.
the more locked into that you are. It's inevitable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you
I
have to be
agree.
conscious to pay attention to it.
Yes. And I feel like through some of the practices and learnings over the years, I've been able to tap into that, which is really, it is a great space to be in. And it gives you more trust and faith in the universe and the path that you're on. So, I
And
definitely,
I always say
yeah.
whatever somebody wants to reference that as, right?
Yeah.
Like you can call that energy, you can call that God, you can call it
Yeah.
whatever religious based worship system that you have, whatever you resonate with. But that, right, is where we all need to be like getting to the place of is just in
Yeah.
that higher path, right? That higher state of being, that higher awareness, self-awareness in all situations.
Yep, I agree. And so the training program that you've created, tell us a little bit about that. So if someone's listening and they're like, I really need to learn more about this, I want to become more of a conscious leader. How would that experience, what might that look like for them?
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah.
It's a 3-month program initially to start. And that's kind of like leadership 101, right? With becoming conscious and becoming aware. It's a roadmap, right? Which we haven't, like to your point, really had before.
Mm-hmm.
For everybody, it's slightly different. So there's a lot of like one-on-one element to it, even though it could be done in a class setting or it could be done one-on-one, right? This
Mm-hmm.
training. But really the biggest thing is that it's individualized tweaks according to somebody being able to pay attention to you. But then there's also
Mm-hmm.
a methodology that it's attached to it, right? There's a process and there's a system that like, okay, now that we've gone through this, now we're going to come into the next stage of development, right? And
Mm-hmm.
people can do that in groups, right? And come together and have that commitment together in that buddy system then together
Mm-hmm.
too, and stay connected as you go through and you funnel. It's like the momentum and the excitement around the development just gets like going and going and going and going. And people like it's fun. That's the other thing. Like it's fun to be consciously aware.
It
It's
is. It feels a lot better than the alternative, that's for sure.
Yeah, when you think about 35,000 choices or decisions a day, right?
Uh-huh.
Is what science is saying, is psychology and neuroscience. And so if you think about that, like only 5% on average they say we're conscious for as a humanity. And
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty deep, you know? So so when you look at that ratio, it's like, wow, we could really up the ante, and technology is here. So the other thing I will say is I
Mhm.
encourage people to get this development, because humanity, right, and the human state of being does need to somewhat hold pace with technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
I,
evolution doesn't happen without conscious awareness.
there's a lot of, and I think you recently spoke on this topic too, just conversations around AI and what it means for people and how they work and what they do. And some people are nervous about AI replacing their jobs, and then others are more optimistic and see it as a complement and making things, they're more efficient. But to your point, humanity, we have to, you can't, there are certain things that technology cannot replace, which is our ability to connect with each other and be conscious, which is not something technology is. So I guess, what is your perspective on, how should people think about technology and conscious leadership, and where where's the balance between that?
Yeah, so great question as well. So the thing is that you're right. Conscious awareness is the one thing that technology cannot mimic. So I
Mm-hmm.
equate AI and its functions almost to our subconscious mind. Our
Mm-hmm.
subconscious mind kind of like wraps up and takes care of all daily tasking and menial, oh, your brain has already made this choice and this decision for you. So I can just go ahead and automatically make this same choice over and over and over again for you,
Mm-hmm.
like take care of that, right? AI is the same thing. It's basically mimicking subconscious mind. It wraps up all tasking, right? It can help with a lot
Mm-hmm.
of tasking, a lot of the subconscious mind things and chores, which frees you up then for more creativity, from my personal opinion and my experience using it, right? I don't
Mm-hmm.
shy away from it. I don't shy away from technology, because I think it's important that as many people have their voice in the technology and the latest
Mm-hmm.
technology that's coming as possible. And I take that stance on it. But the biggest thing is there needs to be proper planning. The fear needs to be removed. So if you're an organization, right, I will say this to you. If you are a major corporation or organization, try to pre-plan for your people. If there's going to be a big layoff that's coming, there's training and development programs that you can offer to them, right? Even in a transition, even if you're doing a massive layoff, that will help
Mm-hmm.
them to thrive and flourish in the world and find their next path, find their
Mm-hmm.
next, right? And so the biggest thing is don't fear change, because it's ever happening. It's always
Mm-hmm.
happening. And in life, we have to pivot sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so start figuring out now, if you feel like you're in an industry that's going to be impacted, start figuring out now what your pivot's going to be. What's your
Yeah.
purpose? What's the thing that you've always wanted to do in life and you've never done it, right?
Yeah.
What is it that you feel is like your one calling? And if you don't know that yet, then get into a training and development program similar to what I'm offering, because
Yeah.
you need to know that. You need to get locked into that, right? That's where your resilience and your fortitude comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about a lot on your LinkedIn page, at least, living life on your terms, I think is how you say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really tapping into that piece. That's great. I agree. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And it's important for leaders to hear and be thinking about that, and how we can be more conscious in all of our choices, not fearing change, not fearing technology, but really learning how to work with it, but leveraging our very human strengths and skills and conscious awareness. So
Yeah, that's the game changer, right? Like, let's exercise that piece of us that technology can't touch and can't do, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Alida, it's been fun, so much fun talking to you. You've got a wealth of, we've only scratched the surface of all the things that Alida knows. Where can people find you? I know they can see Ask Alida on the Zoom, but where's the best place to find you, to learn more about your training programs, to check out your services? What's the best strategy there?
Yes, thank you, Jessica. It's at my website, and that
Mhm.
is AskASK, and it's Alida, AILED as in David, A as in Apple.com.
Great. Cool. Well, I'm so grateful for your time today and for you sharing your wisdom
I'm
with my
grateful.
community.
Yeah.
And yeah, if there's anything else you want to impart on listeners as it relates to conscious leadership before we wrap up.
Yeah, continue to check out Jessica, because
Oh,
she's a mover and a shaker in this industry as well, right?
thanks.
I would love to, be working synergistically in partnership with you someday on projects. I'm
Yeah.
sure that, that's ever possible. So, and you're in
Yes.
Hey, go Colorado.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, I love that too. Absolutely. Aileda, thank you so much. We will definitely be chatting again in the future, beyond the podcast. So I'm just really grateful that our paths crossed and that I got to share a little bit of your wisdom with the people that are listening and watching. And I hope this podcast goes viral and everyone starts thinking about conscious leadership in a new way. So thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
All right.